My name is Richard Phobes, and I am an optimist. I believe that solutions do exist for the problems we face. To increase your optimism during these challenging times, I'm going to share with you some creative ideas I've come up with for dealing with problems of crime, warfare, and recession, economic recession. Please keep in mind that my degree is in physics, and I've written a how-to book on creative problem solving. The book is titled The Creative Problem Solver's Toolbox. It's actually better known outside the US because I self-published the US edition. Let's start with the problem of crime. I think that crime can be reduced by adding another rating to movies. The added movie rating would indicate how many years a person would spend in prison if they were to do everything shown in the movie. What you've just experienced is a shift in perspective. Hopefully you're thinking that maybe this YIP movie rating might actually help people learn that what's shown on a screen is not necessarily acceptable in real life. And I'd like you to shift that perspective to be a little bit broader, to consider that maybe there are other overlooked solutions to the problems we face. And a final comment about the YIP movie rating is that it serves a different purpose than the traditional movie ratings as shown here. The traditional movie ratings being G versus R. There's some interesting idiosyncrasies there. And now let's move on to the problem of warfare. I think warfare can be reduced by using 1, 2, 3 ballots in elections. This means that voters mark a second choice, a third choice, and so on when there are more than 2 choices. Of course, you're wondering what's the connection between warfare and voting? The answer is that both are methods of conflict resolution. Also, you'll notice that if you think back in history, warfare has declined as voting has increased in fairness and usage. All of this has been accomplished using primitive single mark ballots. Those are the ones we use today. Of course, it's not obvious how to count ballots. It's not obvious how to count 1, 2, 3 ballots, so I've written some software at votefair.org that implements a voting method called votefair ranking. If votefair ranking were used in a corrupt country, the result would be a cutting of the puppet strings that tie politicians to special interests, the corrupt special interests. That would reduce corruption, and that would reduce the fighting. Now we get to what's being overlooked in Iraq. When the Iraqi parliament votes, the Shiite majority outvotes the Sunnis and Kurds. So I wrote some software at negotiationtool.com that demonstrates how this problem can be solved. The pattern here is that there are higher levels of democracy that are waiting to replace warfare when we're ready to implement them. And now let's move on to the problem of economic recession. One way to increase economic prosperity is to give tax advantages to value-creating businesses during their startup phase. What this means is that we need to protect value-creating businesses the same way we protect children with child labor laws during the time when they are not yet mature. The advantage of value-creating businesses are the ones that create value that previously did not exist, and that includes software companies and all sorts of artistic endeavors. It brings in money from the outside, which contrasts with what banks and insurance companies do, which is simply to redistribute what already exists. There are more ways to increase prosperity that arise by paying more attention to the gap between the voters and the biggest campaign contributors, and spending less time getting distracted by the smaller gap between the 2 political parties. So hopefully you can see that there are solutions to the problems we face. And I'll close by saying that the next time you encounter a challenging and frustrating problem, please consider that the situation is not as hopeless as it might seem.